Close your eyes, weary traveler of the night, and let us set sail upon waters both real and imagined. The world outside your window grows still, but within these shadows, a hidden voyage stirs. Tonight, we follow a trail not carved in the stone, but whispered in legend. A tale that begins with the downfall of one of history's most mysterious orders, the Knights Templar. It is October 13th, 1307, a date etched in infamy. Across France, at the command of King Philip IV, the Templars are seized at dawn. Once the guardians of pilgrims, the bankers of kings, and the builders of fortresses, they are dragged in chains, accused of heresy, betrayal, and dark rituals. Within years, their order is broken. Their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, burned at the stake. History tells us the Templars were destroyed. But history, dear listener, is written by those who prevailed. What if the Templars were not extinguished, but exiled? Here begins the conspiracy. Whispers that some knights escaped the flames, carrying not only their treasure, but also their secrets. Ships under the Red Cross may have slipped away into the night, bound not for Europe's familiar shores, but westward, into the unknown seas. Centuries before Columbus, before Cabot, before the New World was even imagined by crowned kings, the Templars may have sought refuge across the Atlantic. What did they carry with them? Gold plundered from the Temple Mount, sacred relics hidden beneath Jerusalem's stones, perhaps the Ark itself, or scrolls too dangerous for the church to reveal. Legends say they sailed into mystery, their sails vanishing beyond the horizon, their secrets hidden in the very soil of a land not yet charted. In America, faint traces remain. A lonely stone tower in Newport, Rhode Island, its arches strangely European, its purpose unknown. Strange carvings in Minnesota's wilderness, a rune stone inscribed with Nordic letters, yet telling of knights who came from afar. And most famous of all, Oak Island in Nova Scotia, a pit that has swallowed fortunes and dreams for centuries, with clues of hidden vaults, booby traps, and perhaps Templar treasure. These are not just ruins or rocks. To some, they are breadcrumbs across centuries, left by knights who fled persecution and planted their mysteries in a new world. To others, they are evidence of a conspiracy, that the Templars not only survived, but thrived in secrecy, shaping history from the shadows. Tonight, as the waves of time lap gently against the shores of your imagination, we will voyage into this mystery. We will trace the fall of the Templars in Europe, follow the trail of their ships, and explore the echoes that suggest their footsteps reached America long before history admits. Was it exile, survival, or a new beginning? And what secrets might still lie buried beneath American soil? So breathe deeply, let your eyelids grow heavy, and drift with me across the dark Atlantic. For in this journey, we unravel Templar, exiles in America, the New World conspiracy. If you are ready to wander deeper into hidden history, remember to subscribe, share this voyage with fellow seekers, and let your theories rest in the comments below. For every night holds another story, and every story another secret waiting to be told. The story of the Knights Templar begins not in shadows, but in blinding light. In the year 1119, 9 knights gathered in Jerusalem, their mission humble yet profound, to protect Christian pilgrims traveling the treacherous roads to the Holy Land. They called themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, and their chosen quarters lay upon the sacred Temple Mount itself. With their white mantles and crimson crosses, they soon became the very symbol of faith, fused with steel. For nearly 2 centuries, the Templars grew in power and influence. They were no longer a handful of warriors guarding dusty roads. They became the builders of castles, the keepers of treasures, the defenders of Jerusalem, and even the inventors of an early form of banking that stretched across Christendom. Kings trusted them, popes blessed them, and pilgrims whispered their name in awe. But with power came envy. The Templars' secrecy, their rituals shrouded behind monastery walls, their sudden wealth flowing from lands and donations, bred suspicion. Whispers began to grow. What secrets did they guard in their fortified commanderies? What rites did they perform in the candlelit silence of their chapels? To the common folk, the knights were both admired and feared. Men who lived as monks but fought as lions, whose loyalty was pledged not to crown or kingdom, but directly to God and his church. By the late 13th century, their world had begun to unravel. The Holy Land was lost. One by one, the Crusader strongholds fell to rising Islamic powers. Acre, the Templars' great fortress by the sea, collapsed in 1291, its walls soaked in blood and fire. Driven back to Europe, the knights no longer guarded pilgrims or held the front lines of Christendom. Instead, they sat in Europe's heartlands, wealthy, independent, and increasingly viewed as a power unto themselves. Into this shifting world stepped a man both cunning and ruthless, King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair. Burdened by debts, many owed to the Templars themselves, Philip sought a way to rid himself of obligation and to seize their wealth. The Pope at the time, Clement V, was a weak ally to the French crown, and Philip pressed his advantage. Whispers of heresy and blasphemy became weapons sharper than any sword. On the night of October 13th, 1307, Philip struck. Across France, in a coordinated assault, Templar knights were seized in their homes, dragged from their beds, chained in cells. The charges were shocking. Idolatry, sorcery, spitting upon the cross, even devil worship. Under torture, many confessed, but their words, wrung out through fire and pain, carried little truth. Still, the stain of accusation was enough. The once glorious order was branded as heretics. The trials stretched on for years. Some knights recanted their forced confessions, only to be burned alive for defiance. Their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, endured imprisonment for 7 long years before finally being led to a scaffold on an island in the Seine. There, in 1314, flames engulfed him, but not before he cried out a curse, that both Pope Clement and King Philip would stand before God's judgment within the year. And so they did, both dead within months, their reigns shadowed by the smoke of the pyre. To most of the world, this was the end of the Templars. Their lands were seized, their fortresses given to rival orders, their banners cast down. History closed its book, declaring them finished, yet legends whispered otherwise. When the king's men stormed the Templars' great port at La Rochelle on that October morning, they found the fortress empty. The fleet of Templar ships had vanished. Where had they gone? Some said they fled north, seeking refuge in Scotland, where Robert the Bruce defied papal decree. Others whispered they sailed to Portugal, reborn as the Order of Christ. But others still believed in a wilder tale, that the Templars had sailed west into the unknown ocean, carrying with them treasures and secrets too great to fall into the hands of kings. This, dear listener, is where conspiracy takes root. For when men vanish into the horizon with ships, gold, and secrets, imagination fills the silence. Did the Templars truly disappear? Or did they survive, exiled but unbroken, laying the foundations of mysteries that still ripple through history? As the embers of Jacques de Molay's pyre cooled, the order was scattered, its knights fugitives. Yet somewhere, beyond the reach of kings, the legend of the Templars endured. As the official chronicles wrote their epitaph for the Knights Templar, another story began to grow. One written, not in parchment, but in whispers, rumors, and half-buried clues. Though kings and popes declared the order dissolved, too many mysteries remained unresolved. Chief among them, the fleet of ships once anchored at La Rochelle. On that fateful dawn of October 13th, 1307, when Philip's soldiers moved to seize every knight and asset, La Rochelle stood ready. It was one of the most important Templar ports, its docks lined with vessels that carried supplies, pilgrims, and sometimes gold across the seas. Yet when the soldiers arrived, the ships were gone. Some said they had sailed the night before, laden with treasure. Others claimed they had vanished even earlier, warned by loyal allies. Whatever the truth, their absence was never explained. Where did they go? One strand of legend points north. Scotland, in 1307, was already at odds with Rome. Robert the Bruce, excommunicated by the Pope, was fighting for independence against England. In this defiant land, outlawed Templars could find sanctuary. Indeed, stories tell of knights in white mantles riding at Bannockburn in 1314, aiding Bruce's victory against overwhelming odds. Were these warriors remnants of the Templar Brotherhood, exiled but still loyal to one another? Another path leads to Portugal. There, King Denis quietly shielded former Templars by renaming them the Order of Christ. The Red Cross endured, carved into sails that would one day carry explorers like Henry the Navigator and Vasco da Gama across the oceans. Through this lineage, some argue, the Templar spirit survived, their maritime skill and esoteric knowledge hidden in plain sight. But it is the Western path, the boldest and most forbidden, that stirs the imagination. Could those ships from La Rochelle have set their course not north or south, but westward? Beyond the map's edge, across the uncharted Atlantic, into lands Europeans scarcely dared to dream of? Evidence, though fragmentary, keeps the theory alive. Norse sagas already spoke of Vineland, the Viking landfalls in Newfoundland, centuries before Columbus. If the Templars knew of such voyages, perhaps through their contacts in the north, they may have followed the same path. Some point to carvings on the Kensington Runestone in Minnesota, or the Newport Tower in Rhode Island, as proof that Europeans, and perhaps Templars, reached American shores long before Columbus unfurled his sails. Even Oak Island, off the coast of Nova Scotia, is pulled into the legend. For centuries, treasure hunters have dug into its mysterious pit, chasing stories of buried vaults protected by traps and tunnels. Coconut fibers, foreign to the region, have been found deep underground. Wooden platforms sealed in clay and stone hint at careful construction. Could these be the remnants of a hidden vault, sealed by exiled Templars carrying gold, relics, or even the Ark of the Covenant itself? The truth is elusive, but the survival of the Templar myth is undeniable. The order may have been broken by kings, but in the minds of the people, they became immortal. Some believed the knights safeguarded the bloodline of Christ himself. Others swore they possessed the wisdom of Solomon, encoded in sacred geometry. The copper scroll, the Ark, hidden vaults beneath Jerusalem, all of these threads became knotted together in the tapestry of Templar legend. In France, peasants told tales of knights escaping under moonlight, vanishing into forests and mountains. In England, chroniclers hinted that not all had been captured, and in distant lands, stone and rune seemed to whisper that their journey was not over. But perhaps survival did not mean permanence. The Templars may not have built cities or empires in exile. Perhaps they became wanderers, merging into other orders, or scattering into secret brotherhoods. The Freemasons, rising centuries later with their symbols of compass and square, were seen by some as heirs to Templar wisdom, guardians of mysteries passed down from the Temple Mount, preserved through fire and exile. The Whispers never died because the Templars represented something larger than themselves. They were not just knights or monks. They were the embodiment of a dream. That faith, courage, and secret knowledge could outlast persecution. Their downfall was too sudden, their disappearance too convenient. Into that silence poured legend, and in legend they lived on. And so, as Europe moved into a new age, stories spread of Templar ships sailing into twilight, bearing treasures unknown, leaving behind only questions. History wrote their death. Legend wrote their survival. The fall of the Knights Templar in France was swift, merciless, and carefully orchestrated. Yet even as King Philip's men marched into commanderies and castles, one question lingered like smoke over the battlefield. Where had the Templar fleet gone? At La Rochelle, the Order's great Atlantic port, the dock stood empty when the king's men arrived. No sails bore the Red Cross, no hulls sat heavy with grain or gold. An entire squadron had slipped away as if into thin air. For centuries, this mystery has been the seed of countless theories. Some chroniclers claimed the fleet scattered to friendly ports in Portugal or England. Others suggested the ships carried fugitives to Scotland, where Robert the Bruce's excommunicated kingdom offered sanctuary to the outlawed knights. But there is a third possibility, one whispered in taverns and written in secret histories, that those ships turned their prows not north or south, but west. To sail westward in the early 14th century was an act of audacity bordering on madness. Maps of the time showed little more than oceanic voids beyond the familiar coasts. The known world ended in rumor, with sea serpents and monstrous edges of the earth waiting to swallow the bold. Yet by then, whispers of another land had already reached Europe. Norse sagas told of Vineland, a place of forests and grapes far across the Atlantic, where Leif Erikson and his kin had landed centuries earlier. Could the Templars, seasoned sailors and guardians of knowledge, have known of these stories? And if so, could they have followed them? Consider their desperation. Pursued by the most powerful monarch in Europe, condemned by the church itself, the Templars had few havens left. In Portugal, perhaps, they might be reborn under a new name. In Scotland, they might find kinship with an outlaw king. But in the West, in uncharted lands far beyond the Pope's reach, they could begin anew. A fresh kingdom, free from papal decrees and royal debt, where their treasures and secrets might be safeguarded. Some researchers argue the Templars had the resources to attempt such a voyage. They possessed advanced knowledge of navigation, carried forward from their years guarding Mediterranean routes and trading with cultures from Byzantium to the Levant. They had wealth, not only in coin, but in maps, charts, and possibly even relics of ancient seafarers. And they had motive, survival. The flames of Jacques de Molay's pyre were not only a warning, but a promise. The order would not endure unless it escaped. The Newport Tower in Rhode Island often enters this narrative. Its round arches and stonework are unlike typical colonial structures, echoing instead medieval European forms. Some believe it to be a Templar chapel, a silent marker of their landing in the New World. Skeptics call it a mere windmill, built by settlers centuries later. Yet its mystery endures, a question carved in stone. Further west, the Kensington Runestone, discovered in Minnesota, bears inscriptions telling of a 14th century expedition. While most scholars dismiss it as a 19th century hoax, others see in its runes the echo of Norse explorers, perhaps even allies of the Templars, who ventured deep into the American wilderness. If true, it suggests that voyages across the Atlantic were not only possible but real, threading together Norse courage and Templar desperation. And then there is Oak Island. Off the coast of Nova Scotia, treasure hunters have dug for centuries in the infamous Money Pit, discovering tantalizing clues. Coconut fibers from distant lands, wooden platforms sealed with clay, tunnels designed to flood and trap intruders. Could these be the work of men who knew how to guard treasure with cunning and secrecy? To many believers, the answer is yes. The exiled Templars buried their hoard here, securing it with the same engineering brilliance that built their castles in the Holy Land. Of course, history remains cautious. No definitive proof ties the Templars to American shores. The scrolls are silent, the chronicles vague, and the artifacts contested. Yet the absence of evidence only fuels the imagination. After all, how else can one explain the vanished fleet of La Rochelle? Entire ships, with their crews, their banners, their gold, disappeared without a trace. Perhaps they scattered. Perhaps they sank. Or perhaps, under the cover of darkness, guided by maps long forgotten, they set their sails into the western wind, toward a land unknown, toward a conspiracy that even now haunts the edges of our history. The image of Templar sails vanishing into the horizon is more than a poetic vision. It is the beating heart of one of history's most enduring conspiracies. If those ships did not sink, if they did not vanish into European exile, then they must have found new shores. And in the centuries that followed, scattered myths and artifacts began to whisper of a voyage across the Atlantic long before Columbus. Legends of Western lands were already circulating in medieval Europe. The Norse sagas told of Leif Erikson and his kin sailing from Greenland to a place they called Vinland, a land of wild grapes, forests, and fertile soil. These stories, passed down among seafarers, spoke of journeys beyond the known world. Some chroniclers suggest the Templars, through their far-reaching connections, may have heard such tales. If the Norse could cross the Atlantic in open longships, could not the Templars, with their larger and sturdier vessels, have followed? Clues scattered across the New World are often tied to this possibility. In Newport, Rhode Island, a stone tower stands in quiet defiance of easy explanation. Built of rough masonry and circular arches, it resembles medieval European architecture far more than colonial New England design. Skeptics insist it was a mere windmill built in the 17th century, but to those who seek deeper patterns, it is a beacon, a Templar chapel built as a foothold in a new land, its round design echoing the sacred geometry of their churches in Europe. Further inland, in the 19th century, a farmer in Minnesota uncovered the Kensington Runestone, a slab etched with runic inscriptions telling of a 14th century voyage. The text spoke of explorers, some slain by natives, others continuing their mission. Mainstream scholars dismiss it as a forgery, yet believers see in it a bridge, proof that Europeans had indeed reached deep into the continent centuries earlier. Were these Norse alone, or were they joined by exiled Templars seeking to carve a new destiny far from papal reach? Then, there is the enigma of Oak Island, off the coast of Nova Scotia. For over 2 centuries, treasure hunters have tunneled into its infamous money pit, only to encounter strange layers, platforms of oak timber sealed with clay, tunnels designed to flood intruders, and fragments of parchment and metal buried deep within. Coconut fibers, foreign to the region, were found at remarkable depths, suggesting contact with far-off lands. Could this elaborate system have been built to guard a treasure? Not merely gold, but relics of the Temple of Solomon itself, spirited away by Templar exiles. These myths are not isolated. They weave together into a narrative of possibility. A vanished fleet, mysterious ruins, cryptic inscriptions, treasures buried with engineering skill beyond the needs of ordinary settlers. Each clue alone might be dismissed, but together they form a tapestry that refuses to fade. Why, then, has history resisted this narrative? Perhaps because the implications are staggering. If the Templars did indeed reach America in the early 14th century, it would rewrite the story of European exploration. It would mean that centuries before Columbus set sail under the Spanish crown, knights fleeing persecution planted themselves in the New World, carrying with them relics, wealth, and knowledge meant to outlast kings and popes alike. It is not only treasure that fuels these myths, but also the promise of hidden knowledge. The Templars were more than warriors. They were guardians of secrets, initiates of sacred geometry, keepers of relics, and perhaps heirs to wisdom preserved from ancient Jerusalem. If they came to America, they may have seeded this knowledge in stone, in symbols, in societies that later drew upon their legacy. Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and other secret brotherhoods have long claimed spiritual descent from the Templars. Some see America itself, with its symbols, its architecture, its emphasis on liberty and new beginnings, as the fruit of seeds planted by exiles long ago. Of course, history offers no smoking gun. No undisputed Templar artifact lies beneath American soil. No chronicle records their westward journey. Yet in the spaces where history is silent, legend finds room to breathe. And it is here, in the twilight between fact and myth, that the story of Templar exiles in America continues to haunt us. Picture it. A moonlit night in 1307, sails billowing against the Atlantic wind. A fleet fleeing persecution, carrying chests not only of gold but of secrets, relics from Jerusalem, parchments of hidden lore. Beyond them lies a continent unknown to kings and popes, a land where their order might be reborn. Whether myth or memory, it is a vision that has endured for 7 centuries. The Templars may have vanished from Europe's stage, but in the New World, their shadow still lingers, carried on the tide of legends. If the whispers of Templar ships crossing the Atlantic are to be believed, then surely they would have left behind signs, markers of their presence, structures that carried their unmistakable architectural identity. And among the earliest and most mysterious of such signs stands in Newport, Rhode Island, the so-called Newport Tower. It rises quietly in a public park today, surrounded by trees and modern homes. To the casual passerby, it might appear no more remarkable than an old ruin. Its 8 rough stone arches, holding up a circular upper level open to the sky. Yet its existence has sparked debate for centuries. Who built this tower? And why does it look so different from the colonial architecture around it? Official history maintains that the Newport Tower was likely a 17th century windmill, constructed by Governor Benedict Arnold around 1650. It would have ground grain for the early English settlers of Rhode Island, a practical and unremarkable structure for an outpost colony. Yet this explanation has never satisfied everyone, for the tower carries an aura of something older, stranger, and more European than its supposed builders could have imagined. The arches, for one, are Romanesque in style, rounded, heavy, and reminiscent of medieval churches rather than colonial mills. The mortar and stonework seem more akin to construction techniques of the Old World than of simple frontier carpenters. Even the tower's alignment has been questioned. Some researchers have claimed that its windows and openings align with solstices and lunar events, echoing the sacred geometry beloved by the Templars and carried forward by Freemasons centuries later. If it was only a mill, why would its builders incorporate alignments to the Ye heavens? Why use such heavy stonework when wood was abundant? Why construct arches reminiscent of medieval Europe in the wilds of New England? These questions keep the tower shrouded in intrigue. For Templar enthusiasts, the Newport Tower is nothing less than a chapel, a hidden church erected by exiled knights who reached America in the 14th century. Its circular design echoes the Templar round churches of Europe, themselves modeled after the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. In London, in Tomar, in Paris, the Templars built round naves to mirror the sacred. Newport, to believers, is one more link in this chain, transplanted into the New World as a secret sanctuary for their order. The theory gained momentum in the 19th century, when antiquarians first began to question the colonial explanation. Some pointed to a record from 1632, describing an already standing old stone structure in the area, predating Governor Arnold by decades. Others drew parallels to Norse architecture, suggesting Viking explorers had raised the tower. But for those chasing the Templar trail, the case seemed stronger. Exiled knights could have constructed such a tower as both a chapel and a beacon, a foothold for their survival across the ocean. Even today, the Newport Tower carries mysteries that defy easy answers. Carbon dating of the mortar has yielded inconsistent results, some pointing to colonial times, others hinting at earlier centuries. The possibility of reuse complicates matters. Perhaps it was built earlier and repurposed later. Perhaps it was always older than official records suggest. Stand beneath its arches, and the mind begins to wander. The rough stones whisper of Europe's Romanesque style, not New England's timber simplicity. The circular plan feels spiritual, not utilitarian. And the tower's stubborn survival through centuries of storms suggests it was built to endure far more than mere grinding grain. Skeptics will always argue that the Newport Tower is a colonial windmill, nothing more. Yet its strange form continues to attract seekers, historians, and conspiracy theorists alike. For if even one detail connects it to the Templars, a carving, an alignment, a fragment of evidence overlooked, then it would stand as proof that the Order's exiles crossed the Atlantic, leaving behind not only myth, but stone. And so, in this quiet park in Rhode Island, the debate continues. Is it merely a colonial relic? Or is it the most tangible clue that the Templars carved a foothold in America centuries before the Age of Discovery? The Newport Tower remains, above all else, an enigma, a puzzle in stone, standing silently beneath the New England sky, daring us to answer questions that history refuses to settle. If the Newport Tower is more than a colonial windmill, then what was its true purpose? For those who study its arches and stonework with a conspirator's eye, the answer is clear. It is a sacred structure, a chapel in the wilderness, carrying forward the architectural soul of the Templars. The idea of a hidden chapel is not far-fetched when we consider the Templar legacy. In Europe, their round churches were instantly recognizable, circular naves with columns supporting upper galleries, modeled after the rotunda of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. These structures were not utilitarian. They were deeply symbolic, connecting heaven and earth through geometry. To build in circles was to mirror eternity. To align with the heavens was to anchor time itself in stone. Now look again at the Newport Tower. Its round design, supported by 8 heavy pillars, feels strikingly similar to those European chapels. The arches rise, not as functional mill supports, but as architectural echoes of sacred halls. Some researchers have even argued that its openings are aligned to mark the solstices, light piercing the tower in a pattern suggestive of ritual rather than industry. To stand beneath its arches at dawn or dusk is to feel the weight of intention. If the Templars built the tower, what purpose did it serve? It may have been a sanctuary for prayer, a beacon of faith for exiled knights who had left Europe behind. Here, far from papal authority and royal persecution, they could preserve the rituals and vows that once defined their order. It may also have served as a secret meeting place, a chamber where sacred relics were guarded or passed down. Some even speculate that it marked a site of burial, a resting place for knights who perished on their voyage to the New World. The theory becomes even more compelling when tied to other pieces of supposed evidence. In the 19th century, antiquarian Carl Christian Raffin argued that the tower resembled medieval Norse churches, but others countered that the Templar connection was stronger. The round form was rare in colonial New England, but central to Templar design. Could this be a transplanted fragment of their architectural identity, hidden in Rhode Island? Mystics and Freemasons have long been fascinated by the tower. For Freemasonry, which claims symbolic descent from the Templars, Newport Tower represents a physical link between the old world and the new. Masonic scholars point to its geometry and durability as signs of sacred design, and some rituals even reference it as a place of origin, a cradle of secret brotherhood on American soil. Archaeological studies have tried to strip away the mystery. Mortar samples tested in the 20th century suggested a 17th century origin, lending weight to the colonial mill theory. Yet those results remain contested, with others pointing out inconsistencies and the possibility of later repairs. Artifacts found nearby, from native tools to colonial items, complicate the dating. The lack of definitive evidence ensures the mystery remains alive. What fascinates most is not just what the tower is, but what it represents. If it is a mere windmill, then why does it so powerfully echo sacred? European architecture. If it is a colonial relic, why does it inspire such certainty in seekers that it must be more? Perhaps, as with many Templar mysteries, the Newport Tower is a canvas, a structure onto which centuries of longing, conspiracy, and faith have been projected. Still, the idea of a hidden chapel persists. Imagine exiled Templars landing on a distant shore, their ships creaking into the harbor under starlight. They have escaped the fires of Europe but carry with them vows unbroken. To mark their survival, they raise a chapel, modest but enduring, its round arches mirroring the sacred spaces they left behind. By its stones, they declare that their order, though exiled, will never die. And so the Newport Tower stands, weathered by centuries, cloaked in debate. A windmill, a Viking relic, a colonial curiosity, or a Templar chapel, hidden in plain sight. It endures as one of the strangest enigmas of American history, a stone voice from the past, whispering secrets no record dares confirm. In the hush of Rhode Island's coastal winds, the tower remains a riddle of stone and silence. The year was 1898, and the rolling farmlands of Minnesota were quiet beneath the summer sun. In the township of Solem, a Swedish immigrant named Olof Oman worked his land with steady hands, clearing trees for farming. It was there, in the roots of a tangled aspen, that he struck something unexpected. A large slab of stone, heavy and stubborn, etched with strange markings that seemed to whisper from another age. When the stone was pulled free, it revealed inscriptions unlike anything Oman had ever seen. They were runes, characters of an ancient alphabet tied to Norse explorers of centuries past. But these runes told more than just a scattering of words. They wove a story, a tale of explorers venturing deep into the North American wilderness in the 14th century, far from the shores of Europe, long before Columbus ever dreamed of sailing west. The text, translated in fragments, read like a record of tragedy. It spoke of a group of men, 8 of whom had been slain by hostile natives. It told of 30 more waiting by the sea. It was dated to the year 1362, and it carried the voice not of settlers or colonists, but of voyagers whose presence seemed impossibly early. The Kensington Runestone, as it came to be known, ignited controversy from the moment it was revealed. Was it genuine? Proof that Norse explorers had not only reached America, but traveled far inland, leaving their mark in Minnesota soil? Or was it a clever forgery, carved to fool or amuse? Scholars argued fiercely. Linguists declared the runes too modern in form, too inconsistent with known inscriptions. Archaeologists doubted that Norse explorers could have traveled so far into the continent. Yet others defended its authenticity, pointing to details of the language and the weathering of the stone as evidence that it could indeed be centuries old. For Templar enthusiasts, however, the Kensington Runestone became something more than a Norse relic. Its date, 1362, aligned too closely with the period of Templar exile. Could it be that the voyagers described were not only Norse, but accompanied by fugitive Templars who had sailed west after their suppression in Europe? The idea was tantalizing. The Templars, after all, were seafarers. They had ships, knowledge of maps, and, perhaps most importantly, a desperate need for sanctuary. Could they have joined with Norse explorers, carving their journey into stone for posterity? Skeptics scoff at such ideas. They argue the runestone is a forgery, crafted in the late 19th century by Scandinavian immigrants eager to give themselves an epic heritage in their adopted land. Yet the stone refuses to be dismissed so easily. Tests of its weathering have suggested centuries of exposure. The linguistic details, though odd, may reflect dialects not yet fully understood. And the very presence of runes in Minnesota continues to puzzle researchers. To those who see in it a link to the Templars, the runestone represents more than just exploration. It hints at collaboration, at secret voyages shared between Norse sailors and exiled knights carrying forbidden knowledge. the idea gains further weight when considered alongside other anomalies. The Newport Tower in Rhode Island, Oak Island's mysterious pit in Nova Scotia, and the whispered accounts of vanished fleets from La Rochelle. Together, these clues weave a narrative too intriguing to ignore. Imagine, then, the scene in 1362 as described on the stone. A band of voyagers, weary from months of travel, carving their record into stone in the Minnesota wilderness. Around them, forests stretched unbroken, rivers cut through fertile land, and the sense of being far from home weighed heavy. They wrote not only of their tragedy, but also of their endurance. And if Templars were among them, they carried not only steel and gold, but the legacy of Jerusalem, hidden within their order. Today, the Kensington Runestone sits in a museum in Alexandria, Minnesota, still dividing opinion. Scholars continue to debate, tourists gaze in wonder, and conspiracy theorists connect it to larger webs of hidden history. It is, like so many Templar mysteries, both an artifact and a question. A voice from the past whose authenticity may never be fully resolved. Yet whether real or forged, the runestone captures the imagination because it embodies the possibility that the Templars' story did not end in Europe's flames. That perhaps, just perhaps, their exiles carved their legacy into the very heart of the American wilderness, leaving behind a message in stone for us to ponder centuries later. If the Kensington Runestone was simply a Norse artifact, it would already be remarkable. But in the shadow of the Templar legends, its runes take on a deeper significance. For those who believe the exiled knights sailed west, the stone becomes not only a memorial of loss, but a fragment of their survival, a carved voice echoing from the wilderness. The date carved into the stone, 1362, lies nearly half a century after the Templars' suppression in 1307. By then, their order was shattered in Europe, their lands seized, their brothers imprisoned or executed. Yet if some had indeed escaped across the Atlantic, it is within this very window of history that we would expect their traces. The runestone's inscription of tragedy, men slain, survivors waiting by the sea, fits all too easily into the narrative of fugitives struggling in a hostile new world. The text itself is sparse, but its phrasing invites mystery. It tells of 10 men red with blood and death, of survivors carving their record as they awaited the return of others by the water's edge. To Orthodox historians, this is a Norse account, possibly tied to Greenlandic expeditions that ventured into the continent. But to those who see Templar hands at work, it becomes the lament of knights in exile, guardians of relics and secrets who found themselves far from their sacred chapels, forced to record their suffering in a tongue shaped by Norse allies. The Templars, after all, were no strangers to alliances. In the Holy Land, they had traded with Muslims and Jews, learned from Byzantine engineers, and absorbed fragments of esoteric knowledge from every culture they touched. It is not implausible that cast adrift from Europe, they might have sought partnership with Norse descendants still lingering on Greenland or venturing sporadically into North America. The runestone may then reflect not Norse alone, but a mingling of traditions, a blend of explorers whose journey brought them deep into the heart of the continent. Some researchers point to the geometry of the runes themselves. Certain characters resemble forms that appear later in cryptic scripts tied to secret brotherhoods, suggesting a continuity of symbols that carried through centuries. Others claim that hidden codes exist within the inscription, numbers and phrases that align with sacred geometry. The same system the Templars are believed to have preserved from the Temple of Solomon. If so, then the runestone would be more than a simple record of tragedy. It would be a message encoded for those who knew how to read it. Skeptics remain unconvinced. They insist the stone was carved by Scandinavian settlers in the 19th century, eager to root themselves in America's soil with a grand ancestral tale. They point to inconsistencies in the language, anachronisms that seem too modern for the 14th century. Yet defenders of the stone counter with arguments of dialects, lost variants of runes, and weathering that suggests the stone lay in the earth for centuries before its discovery. Like so many artifacts tied to the Templar mystery, it refuses to be neatly explained. But what makes the Kensington Runestone so powerful is not just its contested authenticity, it is the way it connects to a larger web. Consider it alongside the vanished fleet of La Rochelle, the stone arches of the Newport Tower, and the engineered traps of Oak Island. Each on its own might be dismissed, but together they form a pattern, a trail of echoes pointing westward. The runestone fits into this tapestry as another fragment, a cry from the 14th century that insists Europeans, and perhaps Templars, walked these lands long before Columbus. Imagine the scene anew, a band of exiles, bloodied from conflict, carving their final testimony into stone. Around them, stretch forests, untouched by European hands, rivers flowing endlessly, silence broken only by the wind. Their companions lie slain, their future uncertain, yet they leave behind words, not for themselves, but for those who would come after. It is the act of a brotherhood accustomed to secrecy, yet desperate to ensure their struggle would not vanish entirely. Whether the Kensington Runestone is genuine or forged, it continues to function as myth, and myth is often more enduring than fact. For in myth, the Templars live on, their journey unfinished, their voices still murmuring in stone. Off the coast of Nova Scotia lies a small, forested island that has consumed the dreams, fortunes, and even the lives of those who dared to unearth its secrets. Oak Island, as it is now called, has become the stage for one of history's greatest treasure legends. A mystery so deep and layered that it draws seekers into its labyrinth even to this day. And at the heart of it lies a single riddle. Who buried something here, and why? The story begins in 1795, when a young man named Daniel McGuinness discovered a curious depression in the ground beneath an ancient oak tree. With two friends, he began to dig. Only a few feet down, they struck a layer of stone. Deeper still, they encountered wooden platforms spaced at intervals of 10 feet. Excitement grew as the boys continued, for it seemed they had stumbled upon something deliberately hidden, protected by careful design. But the deeper they dug, the stranger it became. At 90 feet, water flooded the pit. Despite every attempt, the excavation could not continue. The pit seemed to be engineered to protect whatever lay within it, with flood tunnels feeding seawater into its depths as soon as diggers approached. Over the next 2 centuries, countless expeditions would return, sinking fortunes into elaborate attempts to break through the defenses. Yet each effort ended in ruin, collapse, or tragedy. Lives were lost, millions were spent, and still the treasure remained elusive. The engineering of the money pit suggests incredible skill. Layers of oak timbers, sealed clay, and coconut fibers, material foreign to Nova Scotia, hinted at careful preparation. Flood tunnels, cut through solid earth and connected to the sea, operated like traps, ensuring that intruders would never reach the vault. Whoever built this system possessed not only wealth, but also the knowledge to guard it with precision. So who would go to such lengths? Many theories have emerged over the centuries. Some believe it to be a horde of Spanish pirates, others the spoils of British loyalists. Some imagine it conceals Shakespeare's manuscripts or even the lost crown jewels of France. Yet for Templar enthusiasts, the Oak Island enigma fits perfectly into the broader conspiracy of exile. Who but the Templars, master builders, guardians of relics, seafarers with vanished fleets, would create such an elaborate vault to safeguard treasure? The parallels are striking. The Templars, when based in Jerusalem, were said to have tunneled beneath the Temple Mount in search of relics and knowledge. Their skill in hidden chambers and engineering is well attested. The Oak Island pit, with its ingenious defenses, seems to echo this same expertise. Moreover, the timing aligns with the legend of their fleet's disappearance. If exiled knights carried their wealth across the Atlantic, Oak Island could have served as their final vault, a fortress of earth and timber meant to hide their greatest secrets. Artifacts discovered on the island have only fueled speculation. Bits of parchment sealed deep underground, fragments of metal, old tools, and stones inscribed with cryptic markings have all surfaced, though never with enough clarity to solve the riddle. One stone reportedly bore an inscription interpreted as, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. Whether genuine or not, it fed the obsession of treasure hunters who poured everything into unearthing Oak Island's secrets. Even today, the search continues. Modern drilling, sonar, and excavation technologies have mapped out cavities, tunnels, and anomalies that suggest something artificial lies below. Yet every attempt to reach it is thwarted by collapses, floods, or lack of funds, as though the island itself resists surrendering its secret. The Oak Island enigma captures the imagination because it combines the physical evidence of engineering with the allure of mystery. Unlike mere myth, the pit is real, its defenses tangible. Something was buried, and great effort was taken to ensure it could not be easily recovered. To believers, this is the signature of the Templars, a brotherhood skilled in secrecy, determined to preserve what kings and popes sought to destroy. As you listen, picture the scene. The year is the early 14th century. Exiled knights hauling chests of gold and relics from their ships under cover of darkness. They labor in secrecy, digging deep into the island, constructing layers of defenses, sealing vaults with timbers, clay, and stone. They know they may never return, but they trust their order's future to the earth itself. Oak Island becomes not just a vault, but a tomb of secrets, waiting for the right hands, or perhaps never meant to be opened at all. And so, Oak Island remains, part legend, part reality entirely unresolved. A pit that has swallowed more than treasure. It has consumed centuries of curiosity, turning seekers into dreamers and dreamers into the lost. If Oak Island's money pit is indeed a vault, then the natural question follows: who built it, and what did they hope to guard? The engineering required to design such a system was extraordinary, not the work of wandering pirates or desperate settlers, but of a disciplined brotherhood with knowledge passed down through centuries. To many, this points unmistakably to the Templars, the knights who once dug beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount, and who vanished into history with fleets of treasure-laden ships. Consider the construction. The money pit was not a simple hole in the ground. It was a masterpiece of hidden defenses. At intervals, wooden platforms layered with clay, stone, and fiber guarded each descent. Flood tunnels connected the pit to the sea, springing open like the jaws of a trap whenever intruders dug too deep. This was not the work of chance. It was strategy, the same meticulous forethought that fortified castles and carved tunnels in the Holy Land. Such cunning fits the profile of men who understood that their treasure could be hunted for centuries, and who built with the intention that none but their chosen heirs would ever recover it. And what was hidden there? Theories abound. The simplest is wealth. Chests of gold and silver seized during the Crusades, donations from kings, or even the treasury of the temple in Jerusalem. But for those who chase the deeper threads of the Templar legend, Oak Island guarded something far greater. Perhaps the Ark of the Covenant itself, the sacred relic once housed in Solomon's temple, whispered to have been discovered by Templars during their early years in Jerusalem. Perhaps scrolls and documents containing secret knowledge, maps of ancient lands, codes of sacred geometry, or texts that would undermine the church's authority if revealed. Or perhaps it was not one treasure, but many, each sealed away as insurance against destruction. The defenders of this theory often point to how the Templars operated. They were not reckless with their secrets. Their rituals were guarded behind oaths of silence. Their treasures were shielded by layers of ceremony and myth. To bury something so carefully on Oak Island would be entirely in character, an extension of their lifelong devotion to concealment and endurance. But if this is so, then who were the guardians of the vault? The Templars themselves may have perished, but their legacy endured. Some claim the Freemasons, rising centuries later with symbols of compass and square, inherited the duty of safeguarding Templar secrets. It is no coincidence, say believers, that Masonic traditions speak of hidden treasures, sacred architecture, and veiled truths. Oak Island may thus be not only a vault, but a link in an unbroken chain of guardianship, a silent covenant stretching from Jerusalem to Nova Scotia. The island itself seems to resist intruders. Time and again, seekers have descended with drills and pumps, only to be driven back by floods, collapses, or financial ruin. Lives have been lost in the attempt, giving rise to the legend of a curse, that 7 men must die before the treasure can be recovered. Already, 6 lives have been claimed in the centuries-long quest. The vault, it seems, demands reverence, punishing those who come with greed rather than faith. To walk Oak Island today is to step into a battlefield of competing theories. Here, a stone inscribed with cryptic markings. There, fragments of parchment sealed deep in clay. Traces of metal, chains, and timber from times that predate the colonists. Each clue is tantalizing, yet none reveal the full truth. The guardianship remains intact. The island continues to conceal its secret. Perhaps that is the point. For if the Templars were its builders, they may never have intended for the vault to be opened by strangers. They may have buried not simply wealth, but the very heart of their order, sealing it away so that no king or pope could ever lay hands upon it. Oak Island then becomes less a treasure hunt and more a memorial, a tomb of vows, locked by men who swore to guard them beyond death. The enigma endures because it touches something primal. The hunger for lost treasure, the dream of secret knowledge, the belief that history still hides its greatest wonders. Whether the pit conceals gold, relics, or only the imagination of centuries, it remains one of the most compelling mysteries on Earth. And for those who see the Red Cross in its shadows, Oak Island is not just an island, but a testament. The Templars were here, and their guardianship is not yet broken. The idea of Templars reaching the shores of America is already bold, but what if their purpose stretched far beyond survival? What if they were not simply exiles fleeing persecution, but architects of a new beginning, planting seeds of influence that would echo across centuries? This is the heart of what some call the New World Conspiracy. To understand it, we must look at what the Templars valued most. They were not merely warriors or monks. They were guardians of secrets, of sacred geometry, hidden relics, and perhaps forbidden knowledge recovered beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount. They were also financiers, visionaries who understood the power of wealth and networks. When their order was struck down in Europe, their survival would not have depended solely on steel or ships, but on the preservation of this knowledge. If they came to America, they may have sought not only refuge, but the chance to build something new, beyond the reach of kings and popes. The clues scattered across the New World are tantalizing. The Newport Tower in Rhode Island, with its round arches echoing Templar chapels. The Kensington Runestone in Minnesota, etched with runes of voyages, deep inland. The Oak Island Money Pit, its labyrinthine defenses guarding some great mystery. Alone, each artifact can be doubted. Together, they form a pattern, hints of an organized effort rather than scattered accidents. Could these have been the outposts of a brotherhood planting itself in the New World long before history records Columbus? Those who believe in this conspiracy argue that the Templars carried more than treasure. They carried maps. There are whispers that the order had access to ancient charts, inherited from Phoenicians, Arabs, or even older sources, showing lands across the Atlantic. Columbus himself sailed with maps of uncertain origin. Might these have been copies of knowledge once guarded by the Templars? If so, then their voyage westward was not blind exploration, but deliberate expansion. And what of their vision? Some theorists claim the Templars saw America as a New Jerusalem, a place where their order could preserve its ideals away from persecution. Others go further, suggesting that they sought to plant the roots of a hidden empire, one that would quietly influence the birth of nations centuries later. This, they argue, is why so many symbols tied to the Templars appear in Freemasonry, and why Masonic influence is woven into the founding of the United States. The all-seeing eye, the compass and square, the sacred geometry of Washington, D.C. Could these be echoes of Templar knowledge carried across the sea? Of course, mainstream historians dismiss such ideas as romantic speculation. They argue there is no proof, only coincidences shaped into a story. Yet history often hides its boldest truths beneath silence. The vanished fleet of La Rochelle, the engineering marvel of Oak Island, the peculiar design of the Newport Tower. These are not inventions, but realities that demand explanation. To skeptics, they are anomalies. To believers, they are signposts of a hidden design. The New World conspiracy suggests that America itself may be the product of centuries of secret influence, that long before pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock, the groundwork was laid by knights who sought freedom from persecution. It is not simply about buried treasure, it is about buried intent, a vision for a society that could carry their legacy forward under new guises. Imagine it, the Templars sailing under the cover of night, not as fugitives, but as pioneers. They land on distant shores, erect stone chapels aligned to the heavens, bury treasures and relics in elaborate vaults, and carve runes in forests to mark their presence. They know their order cannot survive in Europe, but here, in this untouched land, they might endure in secrecy. Generations later, their knowledge flows into new brotherhoods, hidden lodges, and secret councils, shaping revolutions and nations. It is a vision half myth, half possibility, but it explains why the Templar legend refuses to fade. For if their exile to America was real, then they did not die in the flames of Paris or the prisons of France. They transformed, becoming not the lost order of knights, but the hidden architects of the New World. If the Templars truly found refuge in the New World, their survival was not marked by banners and castles, but by shadows, influence hidden in symbols, architecture, and ideas that would outlast kings. For those who trace the threads of the New World conspiracy, America itself becomes less a nation born of chance, and more the culmination of a vision planted centuries before. The most compelling evidence lies in symbols. The Templars revered sacred geometry, numbers, and alignments that reflected their belief in divine order. In Europe, their chapels and fortresses were designed with mathematical precision, echoing the proportions of Solomon's temple. In the New World, echoes of this design appear in strange places. The Newport Tower's circular plan, aligned to solstices, hints at ritual purpose. Carvings on the Kensington Runestone speak not only of explorers, but of coded geometry. Even the layout of Oak Island's mysterious flood tunnels seems to follow deliberate patterns, as though built to test more than simple curiosity. Centuries later, these same motifs appear in Freemasonry, a society that openly acknowledges the Templars as spiritual predecessors. The compass and square, the all-seeing eye, the symbolic pillars of Jachin and Boaz, all trace their heritage to Templar lore, preserved through exile and transformation. By the 18th century, Freemasons were flourishing in Europe and the New World alike. Many of America's founding fathers, Washington, Franklin, Hancock, were men of the lodge. The suggestion is irresistible. The Templar dream, transplanted and hidden, bore fruit in the birth of a new nation. Consider Washington, D.C., a city planned not merely as a seat of government, but as a landscape of symbols. Its streets form pentagrams and grids aligned to celestial events. Its monuments echo ancient temples, obelisks, and domes. Was this deliberate Masonic design, drawing on Templar wisdom carried across centuries? To conspiracy theorists, the answer is clear. The capital of the United States is itself a map, not only of politics, but of secret lineage. But what, then, was the purpose of this hidden influence? Some suggest the Templars saw America as a blank slate, a land where ideals suppressed in Europe could take root. The order had long dreamed of a society bound not by kings, but by a higher law, of freedom from tyranny, of unity under divine order. In the United States, with its emphasis on liberty and self-governance, believers see the echo of Templar ideals reborn. Others argue more darkly. The Templars, keepers of forbidden knowledge, may have seen America as a laboratory for power, a place where hidden brotherhoods could shape nations from the shadows. If their relics and scrolls lie buried beneath Oak Island or hidden in vaults, perhaps they contain not only wealth, but dangerous truths, maps of ancient lands, codes of creation, or secrets of the Ark. To reveal them would shake the foundations of faith and authority. To guard them requires silence, secrecy, and influence carried like a hidden flame. The conspiracy deepens when we look at Native American lore. Some tribes speak of pale-skinned visitors who arrived long before Columbus, bearing strange symbols and gifts. Were these echoes of Norse voyagers alone, or Templars traveling in their company? Legends of sacred stones, of buried metal, of strangers who came from the sea linger in oral traditions. To some, they are faint memory of encounters long forgotten by written history. The shadow of Templar influence is not a single artifact or text. It is a pattern, too scattered to prove, too persistent to ignore. It stretches from the vanished fleet of La Rochelle to the money pit of Oak Island, from the stone arches of Newport to the runes carved in Minnesota, and finally into the very symbols carved into America's founding documents and monuments. Whether myth or truth, the conspiracy thrives because it offers a vision larger than history allows. It says the Templars did not die. They transformed. They became guardians of an unfinished plan, shaping the world from the margins, leaving clues for those with eyes to see. And perhaps that is their greatest legacy, not treasure or relics, but the idea that the world we inhabit may have been quietly shaped by hands we cannot see, by a brotherhood that refused to vanish, that sailed west and planted itself in the heart of the New World. The story of the Templars does not end with flames in Paris or the collapse of their fortresses. If the legends of their exile in America hold even a fragment of truth, then their greatest legacy was not the gold they buried, nor the relics they guarded, but the influence that rippled across centuries. Whispers carried in stone, in symbols, and in the very foundations of nations. When the order was broken in 1307, many believed it was finished forever. Its leaders were executed, its lands seized, its wealth scattered. Yet brotherhoods that value secrecy rarely vanish. They evolve. For the Templars, survival was not only about flesh and blood, but about memory, the careful transmission of rituals, symbols, and ideals that could live on even if the order itself dissolved. Their exile, whether to Scotland, Portugal, or across the Atlantic, became the seedbed of continuity. In Europe, this continuity is seen most clearly in the rise of new fraternities. The Knights of Christ in Portugal, formed from the remnants of the Templar Order, carried on their maritime ventures, sponsoring explorers like Henry the Navigator. Across the Channel in Scotland, the Templars were said to have found refuge, later lending their expertise in stone and symbol to the builders of cathedrals and lodges. These lodges, in time, gave rise to Freemasonry, a society drenched in symbols eerily reminiscent of Templar lore. But in America, the whispers take on a different form. The Newport Tower still stands, its arches curving skyward, defying its supposed colonial origins. The Oak Island enigma resists solution, as though designed by men who understood the value of a secret that endures. And the Kensington Runestone lies at the heart of a landscape that hints at journeys deeper into the continent than history dares admit. Each fragment may be dismissed as coincidence, but together they suggest continuity, a hidden lineage of thought and design that refuse to die with the suppression of the order. The true legacy, however, may not be in artifacts, but in ideas. The Templars valued discipline, secrecy, and the blending of faith with practicality. They were both monks and warriors, bankers and builders. This duality prepared them for survival in exile, adapting their roles to whatever environment allowed their vision to live on. In America, this adaptability might have meant abandoning the visible trappings of knighthood for subtler forms of influence. Hidden lodges, coded rituals, and alliances with those who shared their thirst for freedom. Some historians scoff at such speculation, arguing that the Templars' influence ended with the medieval world. Yet even skeptics cannot deny the persistence of their myth. The Red Cross, the sealed vaults, the whispers of lost treasure, these have endured for 7 centuries, shaping literature, secret societies, and even national symbols. The endurance of the myth itself is part of the legacy, for a myth that refuses to die often conceals a truth too dangerous to be spoken plainly. To believers, the Templars' legacy is alive in the very ideals upon which modern nations were founded. The notion of liberty against tyranny, of knowledge preserved against destruction, of wealth hidden not for greed, but for protection, all echo the vows of knights who once guarded roads to Jerusalem. In the American Revolution, many see these ideals reborn, guided by men who themselves were heirs of secret brotherhoods. The Templar flame, dimmed in Europe, may have been rekindled in the New World. As you drift deeper into this tale, imagine the exiled knights not as fugitives, but as sowers of seeds. They knew their order would never be restored in the open, but in the quiet of new lands, beneath stone towers and buried vaults, they planted memory. Memory that would take root in minds and societies, shaping a legacy that could not be erased. Their presence may never be proven in the records of kings, but it lingers in the architecture of mystery, in the geometry of cities, and in the rituals whispered in shadowed halls. Their true legacy, perhaps, was transformation, from warriors of the cross to guardians of secrets, from a visible order to an invisible one. And it is this invisibility that ensures their story lives on, tantalizing every generation with the thought that the Templars are not gone, but simply hidden, watching from the margins of history. The whispers of the Templar exiles are most haunting when they surface not in Europe's chronicles, but in America's soil, architecture, and lore. For centuries, fragments of mystery have risen like ghostly echoes, convincing many that the Brotherhood of the Red Cross never perished. It simply crossed the ocean and disguised itself in a new land. One such echo lies in the enduring fascination with Oak Island. Each generation that has sought its treasure has become part of a ritual of futility, as though the vault itself resists intrusion. The guardianship feels intentional, not accidental, a message that the treasure was never meant to be recovered by the curious, but only by those who carried the rightful keys. This enduring secrecy reflects the Templar spirit, knowledge and wealth preserved, hidden, waiting. For believers, Oak Island is less a treasure hunt and more a monument to a vow of silence carried into the new world. The Newport Tower offers another voice from the past. Its construction, round and archaic, seems out of place in colonial America. Some claim it was simply a mill, built by early settlers. Yet its arches and dimensions whisper of a lineage stretching back to medieval Europe. Its design mirrors Templar round churches, inspired by the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Why would a mill resemble a chapel of knights? Perhaps it was not a mill at all, but a signal, a reminder to those who knew how to read the architecture that the Templar presence had endured across oceans. Even in the heart of America, far from the coasts, echoes appear. The Kensington Runestone, whether genuine or not, has become a symbol of Templar Norse connection. It suggests that exiles may have moved inland, seeking not only refuge, but expansion. Native American oral traditions speak of pale-skinned strangers who came from the sea, leaving behind symbols and objects that puzzled their hosts. Some legends describe visitors bearing crosses or sacred stones. Were these Templars moving quietly through the wilderness, leaving fragments of their presence like faint footprints in the forest? The echo of the Templars resounds most powerfully, however, in the ideas that shaped the New World's birth. As secret societies like the Freemasons rose to prominence, many of their symbols, twin pillars, compasses, sacred geometry, mirrored Templar lore. In Europe, Masonic lodges had long been repositories of esoteric traditions. In America, they became engines of revolution and nation-building. Washington, Franklin, and others inscribed these symbols into the foundations of a republic. Was this mere inheritance of symbolism, or the flowering of a seed planted centuries before by Templar exiles? The conspiracy deepens when one considers the persistence of certain myths. Why do so many stories of America's founding tie back to hidden treasures, lost relics, and secret maps? Why does the notion of a New Jerusalem resonate so strongly in early colonial visions? And why do so many American monuments, obelisks, domes, and pyramids echo forms tied to ancient wisdom the Templars were said to preserve? These may be coincidences, or they may be echoes of an influence long forgotten by history, but preserved in the architecture of a nation. The legacy of the exiles, then, is not measured in gold recovered or relics displayed. It is measured in influence, in the persistence of symbols, in the resilience of myths, and in the ideals that continue to shape societies. If the Templars planted themselves in America, they may have succeeded in what they sought all along: to escape the grasp of kings and popes, and to build quietly toward a future where their vision could thrive in secret. As you listen now, imagine the exiles walking along a silent shoreline, their ships hidden in the mist. They carry chests not only of treasure, but of documents, parchments, and relics wrapped in secrecy. They carve towers and bury vaults, whisper oaths in the darkness, and then vanish into the currents of time. But their presence lingers, like the low hum of a song half forgotten, carried forward not in chronicles, but in the architecture, rituals, and ideals of a new world. Their echoes do not fade, they resound, waiting for each new generation to hear them, faint but unmistakable. The Templars' story, especially the tale of their supposed exile to the New World, remains suspended between legend and history. It is a tapestry woven from half-remembered chronicles, scattered artifacts, and whispered conspiracies. Yet it endures because it speaks to something larger than fact, the possibility that hidden truths shape the world we know. When the Knights were betrayed on that fateful October morning in 1307, most believed their order finished. The arrests, the burnings, the dissolution decreed by the Pope, all seemed to close the chapter. Yet almost immediately, rumors blossomed. Fleets vanished from La Rochelle, treasures were spirited away, and knights disappeared into the night. Did they ride north into Scotland? Did they slip into Portugal's navy? Or did they sail west, leaving behind only fragments of their presence? These questions became the foundation of a mystery that refuses to die. Oak Island's booby-trapped vaults, the Newport Tower's round arches, the Kensington Runestone's runes carved in wilderness stone, each offers a thread of possibility. On their own, they are anomalies. Together, they form a pattern too haunting to ignore. Even skeptics admit the allure. Something unusual happened in these places, something that cannot be explained by ordinary means. If the Templars were not the authors, then who left these echoes? The mystery also endures because of its connection to symbols. From the twin pillars to the compass and square. From the sacred geometry of cathedrals to the design of Washington, D.C., the fingerprints of Templar lore can be traced across centuries. It is as if their exile planted seeds not only of stone, but of thought, blooming in later societies like Freemasonry. These symbols are more than decoration. They are continuity, a silent assurance that the Brotherhood survived, hidden in plain sight. But what if it is all myth? What if Oak Island's treasure is only a sinkhole, the Newport Tower a colonial mill, and the runestone a clever hoax? Even then, the story reveals something powerful. Our hunger for mystery. Our yearning to believe that history is not as simple as textbooks suggest. The Templars embody this hunger. They were real, their power undeniable, their downfall tragic. That their legacy might live on in secret brotherhoods and hidden voyages is not so far a leap. And even if untrue, the myth shapes our imagination, reminding us that the past is never entirely silent. The enduring power of the Templar mystery lies in its balance of possibility. It is never proven, yet never disproven. Evidence lingers at the edges, always enough to suggest, never enough to conclude. This uncertainty is what captivates, the space between what we know and what we yearn to know. For in that space, stories live, whispered from one generation to the next. To some, the New World conspiracy represents hope, that a brotherhood of faith and knowledge survived persecution to lay foundations for liberty. To others, it represents fear, that secret societies continue to shape history from the shadows, their influence unseen but pervasive. Between these extremes lies the mystery itself, a riddle carved into stone, buried in vaults, and written in symbols scattered across continents. As you let your eyes grow heavy, imagine once more the exiled knights. Their ships drift upon a moonlit ocean, sails emblazoned with red crosses glowing in the twilight. Behind them lies Europe, burning with betrayal. Before them lies a land unknown, vast and silent. They carry relics, parchments, treasures, but most importantly, they carry a vision. Whether that vision took root in the New World or in the hearts of men who followed, it continues to echo. The Templars may never reveal their full truth. Yet perhaps that is the essence of their endurance. Not certainty, but secrecy. For a secret that cannot be proven or disproven never dies. It lives on, just beyond reach, forever calling us to wonder. And so, the story closes not with an answer, but with a question. One that will haunt the shores of Nova Scotia, the arches of Rhode Island, and the symbols carved into America's very foundations. Did the Templars truly find refuge in the New World, shaping the destiny of nations from the shadows? Or is the conspiracy itself the treasure, a myth crafted to remind us that mystery, like faith, endures when truth is lost? The story of the Templars in America is not just about treasure or lost voyages. It is about the enduring pull of mystery. Across centuries, people have devoted their lives, their fortunes, even their safety to chasing fragments of a legend. Oak Island has claimed more than money. It has claimed men. The Kensington Runestone has consumed generations of debate. The Newport Tower stands as a puzzle that refuses to be neatly solved. And behind them all, the red cross of the Templars hovers like a shadowed signature, never fully visible, never entirely gone. What is it about the Templars that captivates us so deeply? Perhaps it is because they embodied contradiction. They were monks sworn to poverty who became wealthy bankers, warriors pledged to Christ who were accused of heresy, guardians of faith who became exiles hunted by their own church. Their very existence was paradoxical, and when such an order vanishes from the records, the imagination rushes in to fill the silence. Their disappearance demands an afterlife, and so legends bloom. In America, these legends find fertile ground. This continent has always been a canvas for possibility, a place where old worlds end and new ones begin. To place the Templars here is to merge the mystery of their exile with the promise of a new land, a story too compelling to ignore. Even if the evidence is scattered and ambiguous, the myth endures because it answers a hunger. The desire to believe that our world is shaped not only by kings and wars, but by secret currents that flow unseen beneath history's surface. Some see this legacy in symbols carved into the very foundations of America. The Masonic lodges, steeped in rituals that echo Templar lore, played visible roles in the Revolution and in the architecture of the new nation. The compass and square, the all-seeing eye, the sacred geometry of Washington's avenues, all suggest continuity, whispers of a brotherhood that survived in silence and reshaped itself for a new age. To the believer, America itself becomes the culmination of the Templars' dream, a land free from the tyrannies of monarchs and popes, governed instead by hidden wisdom preserved through the centuries. To the skeptic, these connections are coincidences woven into story by those who cannot resist romance. Yet even the skeptic must admit the power of these stories. They have endured for 700 years, carried across continents, translated into books, whispered in lodges, carved into stones, and pursued in excavations. A myth that long-lived becomes more than fiction. It becomes a part of our cultural DNA. And so the Templars endure, not because their ships can be found in Nova Scotia or their runes proven in Minnesota, but because we want them to endure. We want to believe that betrayal and suppression could not erase them. We want to believe that knowledge, once gained, can never be destroyed. And we want to believe that even in a world ruled by politics and empires, there exists a secret order moving quietly through the shadows, guardians of truths too, dangerous to reveal. Perhaps that is the real treasure of Oak Island, the real inscription on the runestone, the real design of the Newport Tower. Not gold or relics, but the story itself. A story that inspires us to look deeper, to question what history tells us, to dream of what may yet lie hidden beneath the surface of the world. As you rest tonight, let these mysteries carry you. Picture the Templars not as broken exiles, but as voyagers beneath starlit skies, their ships cutting across the Atlantic toward a destiny unseen. Hear the whisper of waves against their hulls, the murmur of prayers in the dark, the clink of treasures sealed in chests. Feel the hush of oaths sworn in secrecy, binding them not just to each other, but to the centuries yet to come. They vanish into the night, but their story does not end. It becomes ours, an unfinished tale, a riddle carved into stone, a vault sealed against time, a call to wonder, to imagine, to believe that history holds more than what lies on its surface. And so, dear traveler of the night, the legend of the Templar exiles lingers. Neither holy truth nor holy myth, it endures in the space between, the place where history becomes dream and dream becomes history. Sleep well beneath that mystery, and let its echoes follow you into tomorrow.